Hello and welcome to today's PIR live event webinar brought to you by Partners in Research Canada. My name is Stacey Joyce and I will be your host. If you're joining us live, please remember that you can ask questions anytime using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. There's a little button in the middle there. You can click that button, type in your question, and make sure you include a name, school, or city perhaps, so that we can give you a shout out when we ask your question. If you are joining us live and someone else has already asked a question you're wondering about, please look for the thumbs up symbol either just beneath or just beside that question, and you can click that thumbs up to give it sort of an upvote so that we know multiple classrooms are wondering that question and we can prioritize that one for you. And now that that housekeeping stuff is out of the way, I would like to welcome today's guest. We have Dr. Tony Volk. He is a professor in the Department of Child and Youth Services or Studies and an associate member in the Department of Psychology, all at Brock University. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Volk. I'll let you take it away.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. All right. So we start by sharing presentation. So, thank you everybody for joining us today and during this week. It's a really good time for me to try and get some of the message that we researchers have about bullying out to you guys, where it really matters. And I'll talk a little bit about the who, what, and why of bullying. So to start with, I want to define bullying. Bullying is sometimes tricky for people to say this is or is not bullying. I hear that a lot when I go to schools. But what bullying is it's simply any kind of aggression that happens with three things. First, there's a power imbalance, and this basically means that the victim can't easily defend themselves. So this can be a physical difference, it can be emotional, intellectual, popularity, social, just anything that makes it an unfair fight. That's what bullying is. It also has to be deliberate, so it can't happen by accident, and it needs to be harmful. Lots of different forms of bullying. Bullying can be physical, where you're hitting, punching, kicking. It can be verbal, where you're yelling at somebody or threatening them. You can use gossip. You can use rumors. You can exclude people in social bullying. There's increasing intention these days with the Me Too movement about sexual harassment and sexual connotations in bullying, which is another way of hurting others. Racially, ethnically, all kinds of ways of targeting individual differences that can impact people through bullying. And of course, increasingly we're seeing a lot of this behavior moving to the online domains, and we get cyberbullying. So what are some of the reasons that motivate individuals to engage in bullying? Well, when we look at the environment, we can see that there's a kind of a clustering of things that all have to do with making competitive environments. So if you're in a place where the winner wins all, where results are posted and one person is put above the others, if you have peers who support winners rather than people who are nice, and if you have parents, teachers, coaches who really foster the win first mentality, or worse yet, are bullies themselves and sort of display that behavior for the adolescents who they're with. At the level of the individual adolescent, we find two main factors kind of predict whether or not you're likely to be a bully. The first is being impulsive, looking in particular for short-term gain rather than planning for the future. And the second is something that you might not have heard about. It's part of the hexaco set of personality traits. I encourage anybody who's interested, just Google hexaco. And this trait is not only the best predictor of bullying, it's the best predictor of things like being a narcissist, a psychopath, an offender. It's a really bad variable with a really kind of innocent name, and that's honesty, humility. And this essentially means that bullies are much more likely to be dishonest. They're willing to lie, they're willing to manipulate, and even more importantly, they're really arrogant. So they think they deserve better. They think they should be the winners. And if you're a loser, well, that's because you deserved it. So people who have those characteristics, adolescents who have those characteristics, are much more likely to bully others. And I can't do a talk on bullying without bringing up this guy as one of the best examples you can think of as somebody who isn't that interested in the truth and has a really high opinion of himself and does an awful lot of bullying. So these are some of the environmental and personal factors that explain why and how somebody does it, but it's not really explaining the underlying motive. And this is kind of the big million-dollar question that my lab and my collaborators have been looking at, is why do bullies do it? What's in it for them? Well, one of the things that we know is that it's not because they're social rejects. They tend to have average or better social skills and mental health than the average child. So it's not like something is broken in the sense that they don't understand what they're doing. Instead, we found out that they're doing it for three main reasons. The first is to get stuff. And this can be getting somebody's lunch money, or more accurately, it's usually getting the best soccer field, getting the best seat in the cafeteria. At your guys' age, as you're starting to enter adolescence, a really important reason becomes dating, trying to get the attention of people that you want to try and date and trying to knock out any competitors, and then to become more popular. So does it work? Well, the answer is sort of. In that, yes, bullying can help you get resources. We know that it does help students knock out competition, get things that they want. We know that in our data that bullies actually do date earlier and they date more often than kids who are not bullies. We don't know how good those dates are. They might not be very quality dating relationship. We're actually studying that right now. But certainly they are dating earlier and more often. And everywhere that we've looked, in my lab, China, Caribbean, Canada, and we have colleagues all across the world, we find that, like it or not, bullies who target other kids end up becoming more popular. So you can see that there's some pretty compelling reasons here for why somebody would do this. This isn't a broken behavior that's happening by accident. These are kids with decent or better social skills deliberately hurting other kids to get some of the things that they want. So that's what it does well. What doesn't it do well? Well, one of the biggest things that bullying does is it makes you less liked. So how does that go with being popular? Well, being popular means that, say you're the captain of the football team and you bully the other kids. It means that other kids will let you go first. They'll let you be the leader of the group. They won't try and argue with you. So they give you that kind of popular respect. But behind your back, they don't want you to come to the party. They don't want to hang out with you. They wish you would go away somewhere else. And the reason they're not telling you is because they're scared of you. And as soon as they get the chance, they'll try and dump you. And we also know the other thing is this arrogant behavior drifts bullies towards things like problem drinking and drugs, problems with violence, problems with crime. So this general predisposition to be arrogant and exploitative really ends up hurting people in the long run. So what's a better way maybe of getting some of these things? And the nice thing about our data is that it's actually showing that kids who are powerful and nice are the ones who are the most popular. So if you really want dates, you really want popularity, the best way of doing it is to be strong, popular, but nice. And importantly, this increases as you get older. So you could imagine the captain of the high school team, he can intimidate the 30 kids in his class into being called the boss and making sure nobody goes against them. What happens when they go to university and there's 3,000 or 30,000 other people? Well, what happens is people just leave the people they don't like. So this isn't a strategy that works well for most people as you get older. And so we know that young adolescents who start off being strong but nice end up being the most popular in the long run. And this is because as a species, we are built to cooperate. We literally have evolved to cooperate with other individuals. So this is a bit gross. It's a sheep brain versus a human brain. I put it up there because a big sheep is about the size of a small woman. So our brain should be about the same size. And the parts of our brain that control things like your heart rate, sleeping, they are the same size because it's the same job in sheep as it is in humans. But all the rest of that big brain is devoted to things like cooperation. How can we get along with other people? And when we look at the history of humans, we go back tens of thousands of years to the hunter-gatherers. What made us the dominant species on the planet wasn't the fact that we were the strongest, the fastest, the toughest. It's because we were the best at working together. And so that's what makes humans at their best. And we can see that here's a group of kids gathering water. If the tallest one of those kids wants to bully the other kids, they probably could. But then they wouldn't cooperate and get the water that they need to survive. So cooperation is really crucial. And this explains why we like people who are nice. We might respect somebody who's popular in terms of we don't want to mess with them, but we don't really want to spend our time with them. Now, how does this work out in the real world? Well, we know that big businesses that tend to bully other companies in the short run tend to profit, but companies like tobacco have lost billions of dollars in lawsuits. We've seen Microsoft and Facebook being hit with antitrust lawsuits for billions of dollars in the European Union. Big governments, the United States tried to throw its weight around, and that didn't work out too well. It cost them prestige and some of their economic dominance. China just made the same mistake at a recent summit. And our favorite president, Donald Trump, just took a historic beating in the midterm elections. Why? Because voters were saying, yes, we like that he's powerful. We don't like that he's a jerk who bullies people. Right? So being nice really pays off. And same thing for celebrities who bully other people. Russell Crowe was one of the highest paid actors in the early 2000s until he went on a tirade, bullied a bunch of people, and his career took a huge nosedive. The Me Too movement that's been happening recently is another great example of men who have taken advantage, bullied women, and they've paid a significant price. So bullying may work in the short run, but the long run doesn't look so effective. Now, we've talked about bullies. What about the other side of the equation for victims? Well, what we know here is that unlike kind of the mixed message we have for bullies, it's a pretty clear message for victims and that there are very serious costs. Now, bullies in adolescence, it's not that they lack empathy. That sometimes happens in grades 1, grade 2, but by the time you're in grade 7, grade 8, you know that calling somebody a fat pig, that's going to hurt them. The problem is bullies tend not to care. They tend to prioritize their own feelings. That's why they're arrogant. And so they minimize what their victims are going through. But these things can cause you to want to leave school because you don't want to be picked on. And if you're not attending school, your grades are going to suffer, which can hurt your future in terms of getting into universities. It can have problems making friends because A, you're not around, and B, people are nervous about hanging around somebody who's a target. And then physically and mentally, we know that there can be health problems that can persist all the way into adulthood. And of course, tragically, we've seen that there are sometimes ultimate costs to pay from bullying when young people take their lives in order to stop the pain they get from bullying. So why are victims chosen? You know, is it because that they're losers? Is it because that they're just not good people? Well, I could give you a huge list of famous people who were bullied when they were younger and have gone on to be incredibly successful. Today, I'm just going to limit it because of time to the popularity question. Do kids who get picked on, are they inherently unpopular, inherently impossible to be popular? Well, if we just look at Hollywood, one of the most highest paid male actors right now is Christian Bale, bullied in his adolescence. One of my favorite ones a little bit before your time, Lou Ferrigno. He was an actor who played the Incredible Hulk. He could do it without any CGI, any body makeup. He was literally one of the biggest, strongest men who've ever lived. He was picked on as a teenager because he had a hearing aid and couldn't speak properly. So even being big and strong didn't protect him. Michael Phelps, the winningest Olympian ever, was bullied in adolescence. Megan Fox, voted the most popular actress. I just looked at her today. Her stats listed as the #2 best looking actress in Hollywood, was teased for how she looked in adolescence. Tom Cruise, the highest paid actor in Hollywood, teased for how he looked in adolescence. Steven Spielberg, the most successful Hollywood director, teased for his creativity and how he looked in adolescence. So clearly being a victim isn't a sign that the person isn't worth something. And it's a sign of something that the bully saw that they were able to turn into an unfair advantage. That's what the bully is looking for. They're looking for some way to have an unfair fight. So what works to stop bullying? The first thing to recognize is that bullying is hard to stop. People have been trying now with research and interventions for over 20 years. And they've made a small dent, but not a big one. And that's because, again, there are sometimes strong reasons, strong motives for bullies to try and get what they want. Does fighting back work? Fighting back can work in terms of stopping you from being targeted in the first place. But if a bully really wants to pick on somebody, they'll find the weakness. As I said, you could think of Lou Ferrigno, well over 6 feet tall, huge muscles, and instead they pick on his hearing disability. You can't punch your way out of somebody calling you stupid. You can't punch your way out of not being invited to parties. So fighting back isn't really effective, especially when somebody's been targeted. Once that's happened, really the best thing that we can do is get them to ask for help. And they shouldn't be ashamed, because the bully has chosen this because it's an unfair fight. The bully has made sure that they have an advantage. They've cheated to make sure that they will be able to attack this person without being attacked back. And what we can do to stop that is by bringing in other friends or adults into the mix. And now it's no longer an unfair fight, and the bully doesn't want any part of that. More generally, we can encourage where we have cooperative tasks, cooperative friendships, and environments that promote long-term behavior rather than short-term benefits. So cooperation is something really important that teachers, parents, friends, classmates, we can all do this to have better environments that reduce the incentives for trying to be the #1 person in the class. And I'll empathize with you guys because you're in a tough spot. This period of adolescence between grades 7 and 8, so some of you are leading into it, some of you are in those years. Those are the peak years for bullying. And we think it's because it's the onset of puberty, it's the onset of dating. You have this whole new arena to compete over, and it's a really challenging time. But remember that you can do something. Whether you're a victim of bullying, you need to stand up and tell somebody and get that help to make it a fair fight. If you're a bystander, you need to stop rewarding bullies with the respect that they want. You need to try and promote an environment where everybody benefits. And if you're a bully, you really need to think about what's your long-term goal here, right? You might be popular for the next year or two, but in the long run, more and more people are not going to like you. And as people get older, they get better at avoiding bullies. So remember that even if you want to be popular and get dates, the best way to do so is to be nice. So for example, if you want to show people you're tough and strong and not to be messed with, stand up for somebody who's being picked on, right? Intervene in a bullying situation rather than being the bully. You'll still show people that you're strong and not to be messed with, but people will know that you're nice. And that is the single best way to get people to like you. And again, I know that sounds kind of corny. It's what you hear from your parents or other adults, that just be nice and it'll all work out. But literally, I can tell you the science backs this up. The science of how we like and get along with other people says that nice people finish first. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us. I think that's really a compelling argument. It's easy to say, well, adults are just saying that nice people come first and this is beneficial, but it's definitely nice to hear that it's been studied and you have evidence that really supports this message that we've been given or we're giving for years. So we have a pretty full house today. Lots of questions coming in. I want to get right to it. Our first question comes from Aaliyah in Mississauga, wondering if bullying can be caused by how you were raised.
Yeah, absolutely. The two big things that parents can do is they can encourage their kids to be cooperative. Right? The parent who says, Susan, you need to go out there and win, right? That's what counts. There's first place and then there's losing. Second place is for losers. That's going to encourage kids to take a bullying mentality. And the other thing that parents can do is they can be bullies, right? And they can show their kids that they got to where they were by bossing other people around, intimidating them. So parents can really play a significant role in whether or not somebody decides to bully others.
Right. And next we have a question from Layla at Midnapore, who's asking, how did you get interested in studying bullying? And were you ever bullied?
It's a good question, Layla. I, to start with, wasn't really picked on very much other than one of my older brothers. He and I fought a lot. The nice thing is I have a lot of older brothers, so I was always, if you like, protected. So I didn't have to worry a lot about bullying. What really got me into the research is when I arrived here at Brock and I started getting students in my lab and saying, what do you want to look at? One of the things I was studying was parenting and bullying, because I started off with parenting, and the students were really interested in bullying. So it's been young people who've driven my interest in this, and the more that I've done it, the more interesting it becomes. But really, it was young people coming to me and saying, we need to do something about this.
Right. And we have a question from Ms. Sampson's class. They're wondering, what do you do if the bully is friends with your friends?
Yeah, that's a really hard question. Because again, these bullies are often some of the more popular kids. That's one of the reasons they're able to bully, because they have that advantage of having social support. The best thing you can try and do is try and steer people towards more cooperative things. Right? Like, why do we need to pick on this kid? Why don't we have a game where everybody's a part of it? Right? Why don't we do something where we involve everybody? And then when they do engage in that behavior, if you're able to stand up to it, great. If you don't feel confident to stand up and stop it, at least try not to reward it. Turn your head away, don't look, don't give them the attention and the popularity that they want.
Right. And now we have a question from Ms. Young's class, wondering, are bullies bullies because they've been bullied before?
That's another good question. These are all good questions, actually. The term that we use for kids who've been bullied before are bully victims. And they're about 10% of bullies. And they behave the way that most people think of when we think of bullies. They come from homes with really disruptive parenting. They don't have good social skills. They don't have good self-esteem. And these are kids who lash out at pretty much anybody. And they don't become more popular. They don't get more dates. So there are a category of kids, probably the ones that teachers see the most, who really have problems with social skills, and those are bully victims, and they're at a special risk. And for time, I didn't spend a lot of time talking about them, but those are usually kids who need some serious help in building up their social skills and learning how to deal with others.
Right. Well, now we have a slightly different question from, I think, probably a budding scientist in Madam Wowchuk's class in Thunder Bay. Olivia she wants to know, how do you test whether or not people actually like nice people?
That's a great question, Olivia. What we do is we use something called peer network analysis. It sounds fancy, but what we do is we go to a class. Say if we went to your class, Olivia, we get a list of everybody in your class, and then we ask you to rank every person in the class. Is this person your friend? Is this person your best friend? Do you bully this person? Does this person bully you? Does this person help others? And then we get a list of everybody in the class, and we can see how many people said that they like Olivia. And if people are also saying she's a bully, then we can see if that's happening. And when we use those techniques, we find, again, that people say, yes, this bully is popular. They have a lot of power in the class, but we don't particularly like them. We don't particularly want to be around them.
Right. Next, we have a question from Shakira at Midnapore, wondering if bullying looks the same in elementary school, junior high, and high school. And if not, what is the difference? What can elementary students do to prepare to go into junior high?
These are all really great questions. The bullying in younger kids, when we're talking about the early elementary from JK up to about grades 4, it is most strongly related to a lack of empathy. That's the ability to understand what other people are feeling. So when a grade 1 is picking on a JK student, it's often because they don't really understand the implications of what they're doing. The biggest difference is that as you get older, they understand that, and now it becomes more of an exploitative behavior. I know what I want, and I'm just going to get it through you. And so the way to prepare for that is really, as much as you can, build up these social groups that don't reward winner takes all, and that don't give the popularity the biggest, the strongest. Respect everybody, cooperate with everybody, and that really reduces the incentive for the bully to try and chase that number 1 spot.
Great. Next, we have a question from Ms. Peterson's class, wondering, how can the nice person influence the bully to try to help them change their behavior? That's the grade 5s and 6s. Yeah,
that's, again, you guys are asking all the stuff that we're looking into, and we have an intervention that we call meaningful roles, where we try and get students in the class to pick jobs that they would find meaningful. And then we pair the bullies with powerful pro-social people so they can learn how to do these jobs positively. So for example, being in charge of greeting everybody when they come into the school. There's a nice way and there's a bad way of doing it. And if you do it the nice way, it actually not only reduces bullying, it makes you more popular. So you can kind of set yourself up as an example of how to behave and get the benefits that the bully wants without having to hurt other people to do it. The other thing that you can really do is, again, try and go out of your way. I keep saying these cooperative environments, but it really makes a difference if you have a group of people who generally don't talk badly about each other, who generally don't snipe each other behind their backs. Setting that positive tone really reduces the potential for the bully to get gains.
Right. So still lots of questions coming in, which is great. We have a few different classes asking about what to do if you're being bullied, or maybe even if you are witnessing bullying going on, and you tell an adult, but they do nothing about it. So one of those students is Joshua in Brantford asking this question.
Yeah, that's a really unfortunate situation. I've actually seen it happen. My colleagues Wendy Craig and Deborah Pepler videotape kids in the playground, and we sometimes saw cases where the teacher would walk right by and a kid would tell them, the teacher would just wave. Tell somebody else, right? And tell them more strongly is what you really need to do. If it's the teacher who's not listening, tell the principal. And then if they won't listen, tell your parents. And remember that bullying, it's an unfair situation. So it's not that you and your friend got into a fight and you want to now get an adult to team up and make her get punished or him get punished. You've been put in an unfair position. It's only sensible and fair that you get help so that it's now an even playing ground. And bullies don't like even playing grounds. As I said, they're not stupid, so they'll back off.
Right. And we've got a few questions that have come in from Ms. Empey's class and Ms. Sampson's class about mental illness and bullying. So both sides of this, the bully and the victim, could mental illness cause someone to bully? And what mental illness might arise from being a victim of bullying?
Yeah, with mental health, the bully victims are the worst off. Bullies tend to have, as I've said, average or better mental health. When you look at a study that says they don't, it's almost always because they've included being aggressive as a sign of poor mental health. And obviously, bullies are aggressive. Where victims suffer is they tend to suffer first from anxiety. It's a very worrisome thing, naturally, to be worried about going to school and getting hurt. That's not fun. If you're not afraid of being hurt, there is something wrong with you. And then that anxiety leads to depression. And we've now have data from the United Kingdom showing that this can persist into your 30s, into adulthood. So some of these mental health issues are really serious. And of course, the tragic examples of suicide show that this really can hurt. So it's something that we have to take very seriously.
Right. And now we have a few questions that have come in about cyberbullying in particular. Ella from Mrs. Leander's class wants to know if cyberbullying is just as bad as actually bullying in person to someone's face.
Yes, generally speaking. Again, what makes bullying really harmful depends a lot on the victim. So if you called me Four Eyes, it wouldn't really bother me. One of my kids is in grade 4 and just got glasses. I think it would bother him if somebody called him Four Eyes because he's not used to it, and that would really hurt his feelings. So the content matters more than the format, and that goes for which is worse, rumors versus punching versus online. The really nasty thing about online is that it can be really hard to track and stop. I mean, it's not necessarily the school's domain that they can get in and interfere. It's not easy for parents to do that. The big companies haven't shown any willingness to take it seriously and say delete posts and remove some of this stuff quickly. So the biggest difference that we find with online bullying, and by the way, most people who bully online also bully in real life, is that it's tricky to stop, which is probably why some of these bullies figured this was a good place to go to bully other kids.
Right. So I want to get in a few more questions before we close off for today. We've talked already about what we can do to try to stop bullying, but I think there's still effects. Even if that bullying is stopped, is short-lived, the victim is still going to have feelings about that. And we have a question from Rachel in Brantford who's wondering if you have some strategies that successful people did to get over bullying that happened when they were younger.
Yeah, another excellent question. I mean, one of the first things I can say is, if at all possible, make sure you have at least one good friend. And that's certainly something that adults can encourage, maybe not as easily when you're in grade 7 or 8, but when children are younger, making sure that they have these friendships. What we know is if you have at least one close friend, your rate of mental health problems drops by 50%. Right? And that's because mom and dad can say, oh, never mind, sweetheart, they're just jerks, don't worry about them. But mom and dad aren't your age. They don't understand exactly what you're going through. So having somebody your age who can tell you, yeah, they're jerks, makes all the difference. So that's the first really important thing that successful people will all say, is they had people they could rely on to still feel good about themselves. So seek out those friendships. The other thing you can do is remember it for what it is. This isn't anything about you as the victim. It's not because you're flawed. You are in many ways an accidental victim, which doesn't really help you. But it helps you understand why this is happening and why it doesn't mean you're a bad person. So keep that long-term focus and remember that the problem is being caused by the bully, not by you.
Right. And I have to ask this question. I love this one from Chase in Kenilworth. Excellent question, Chase. How do you make bullies your friend?
Yeah, that's another really good question. And probably the most effective way of doing that is, again, cooperation. Find a goal that you have to work together on. So if there's a project in class that you need to work on worth a lot of grades, and you end up working with the bully, right? And the bully needs this grade to do well, the bully has to work with you. And that triggers this thing called cognitive dissonance. It's a psychology term. It basically means it's hard to have two different thoughts in your head at the same time. So if the bully is sitting there saying, okay, I need to cooperate with this person, I need this person to succeed, versus I want to hurt this person to get what I want, one of those two feelings is going to have to go away. They can't exist together. So in all likelihood, if they need that grade, they'll have to toss the idea that they are interested in bullying you. So really try and find these connections, these bonds that you can make with the individual. But on the other hand, I would also stress that it's really up to the bully to make the difference here. And if it's not working, at some point it might be best to just cut ties and walk. Rather than trying to change somebody who isn't interested in change. If they're not interested in their grades, for example, and don't care about the school project, they'll rather bully you. But as much as you can, find a cooperative bridge. Right.
And so related to that, we had a question here. I'm just searching for that. There we go. From Danielle at Mindapore, wondering, what should you do if you're already friends with this person and that person is nice to you, but you notice that they're bullying someone else? You're already friends with that person. Is there something that you can do in that situation?
Absolutely. Again, it depends on how comfortable you are in standing up to the person. The most direct thing would be to say, hey, friend, I totally like hanging out with you, but it's not cool when you go after these people. You just can't do that. That's not the kind of thing I like, and it makes me like you less. So, make that choice, and that's the most effective way of getting them to stop. That's also kind of blunt. You might not feel comfortable doing that. So again, just, as much as you can, disapprove of what they're doing. Just make a little... Yeah, when they do that, or when they say, hey, wasn't it funny when I said this? No, not really, right? I liked it better the other day when we were helping those kids, the little kids at lunch. We had a little reading project or something. Mm. So if you do that, we know that peers influence each other's behaviors. And so a popular bully can get other kids to start bullying others. But a strong friend can also pull a bully away from that kind of behavior by not approving of what they're doing and showing them better ways.
I really like that. There are certain situations where, you know, you might feel comfortable speaking up and just flat out being blunt, as you suggested. But I really like those strategies that you suggested about just when asked if something is funny, to just say, no, I really didn't think it was. And I think that will help to sort of deflate the benefits the bully is hoping to get from their behavior. So we do have to wrap things up. I want to maybe ask this one question from Andrew, who's wondering, according to your research, what is the most effective way for a single student to get rid of a bully? Maybe if that student's the victim or if they're a bystander.
Yeah, it's challenging because there's lots of different kinds of bullying. I would have to say the most effective way of getting rid of a bully is getting rid of the power imbalance, because that's really what they're looking for. And there's research showing that what a lot of bullies do is it's not about them and a particular victim. They'll actually cycle through victims. They'll maintain a group of victims, but they'll shift different people. Because I haven't gotten into this in a lot of detail, but a lot of times what the bully is trying to do is nothing to do with the victim. So number 2, for example, is hitting number 17. They don't care about number 17. Number 17 isn't a threat to their popularity. Number 17 doesn't have what they want. So why are they doing it? It's because they're looking at number 1 and number 3, right? While they're hitting number 17, they're saying, hey, number 1, you see what I'm capable of? Number 3, you see what I'm capable of? And so they're trying to send a signal that they're tough and they're not to be messed with. Or they could do it with words, or they can destroy somebody's reputation and say, see what happens when you go against me. So what they're looking for and why they pick number 17 is because they want a cheap signal. It would make more sense for that number 2 grade 5 to go and find a number grade 8, beat up the toughest grade 8 in the school, and then you'll be the toughest kid in the school. Problem is that's not likely to work, because that grade 8 is going to be bigger and tougher, and they don't want that fight. They don't want to get into that kind of confrontation. So if you can bring people on your side, peers, parents, anybody that you can bring up to make that unfair fight more fair, then bullies aren't interested. They're not interested in sending a signal if it's likely to get them into trouble or get them retaliated against. Cowardly is one word that you can certainly use. I would say they're very conscious of the costs. So if the costs, and again, you don't have to attack them, you just make the potential cost really high by bringing in parents or peers. That is the best way that we know of to stop bullying. Right.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today and giving some definitions for students to think about, some reasons why bullies might be doing what they're doing, some strategies, and also some information about why this is such a big problem and why we should be paying attention to it. So thank you so much for answering our questions today, Dr. Volk.
My pleasure.
Just to let everyone know, upcoming PIR live event webinars include alternative energy, and we have multiple events coming up in the first week of December about coding for Computer Science Education Week. Information about these webinars and other educational programs from Partners in Research Canada is available at pirweb.org. Thanks so much for tuning in today and sending such wonderful questions. We will see you next time. Bye now.